Without further ado, I'd like to invite up Reverend Shanker, because today is really about studying and learning from the divine principle and understanding the power of the divine principle in our lives. And we're extremely fortunate. We don't want to miss a minute, so without further ado, I'd like to welcome Reverend Shanker.
That's my name.
I love it.
We are so inspired he's here.
So is he. He's inspired to be here. Good morning, everyone. How are you? Good. I am excited to be here. I've been studying and working with this particular expression of truth for about 40 years, a little more than 40 years, since I was 18 years old. And what I found is it didn't make me more narrow. It didn't make me more sure that I'm right and others are wrong. But I think any genuine study of the truth and any genuine spiritual path should make you more aware that truth is bigger, that God is bigger than your religion and can't just fit into one religion. That doesn't mean our religious faith is wrong or bad, or it's simply that God is beyond and bigger than we can grasp. And I think any genuine path of truth, first of all, my experience is the more that I've learned, the more I became aware of how little I actually understand. And so even as you grow in understanding, I think also ideally you become more humble, more aware that there are things we can't grasp. And I think also a genuine path of spiritual growth and truth is one that takes you from certainty and dogma and absolute and this is right and this is, to a broader understanding of not only the fundamentals, but also aware that there's some aspects of uncertainty and some things we are, there's aspects I'm going to share with you that I believe, but I wasn't there at the beginning of history. But there's other aspects that we'll talk about today that I know, I'm convinced, based on my life experience. And I think you'll resonate with it as well. Here's how today will look. Oh, I was going to say a little bit more about me. Following this path, I want to talk a little more about me. Following this path and this understanding has also been extremely beneficial to my life. As I said, it hasn't narrowed me. I've taught the principle on 5 continents. I've shared it actually with presidents of countries, 2 different presidents. I've shared it with religious leaders, with Buddhist leaders, Hindu leaders. I've lived and worked in Africa for several years. I lived and worked in Southeast Asia for several years. I've been with, lived with, and taught people of 5 skin colors. And had the fortunate opportunity to see how similar we are in our hopes, dreams, ideals, how similar we are in our struggles and challenges, how consistent the challenges that humanity faces in family and relationships and ideals and hopes and dreams and material existence are so similar, even though our situations are dramatically different. I'm married, although my wife left this world about 6 years ago, ascended, went on to the next stage. I have 4 children. Just had my first grandchild born a couple weeks ago. I found a way to squeeze a picture into the presentation, don't worry. I want to talk about the nature of the characteristic of divine principle as a teaching. We're going to be looking at the divine principle, the teaching that came from the insight and inspiration of Reverend Sun Myung Moon, the founder of the Unification Movement. It didn't come from years of university study. It didn't come from research and debate, but it's a revealed truth. And yet you'll see it's grounded in reality. It's relatable to logic, reason, social science, etc. And I want to present it that way. Now, the divine principle is an expression of truth. Truth about human life is something that's eternal. And yet, throughout our human experience and throughout human history, there have been different expressions of the truth. I'm going to share some things today that might be new to some of you. How many are here How many are here hearing an expression of the principle for the first time? Any expression of the principle for the first time? Okay. How many have heard some expressions of the principle, but this series called Lasting Imprint, this is the first time you're hearing Lasting Imprint, an introduction to the Lasting Imprint. Okay, I think you'll appreciate it. It approaches very differently than the traditional teaching of the divine principle, which is very good for deeper study. This is like an introductory level. You study language, English, mathematics, all throughout school. Do you study the same things as an elementary student as you do in college? It's the same subject, right? Same topic, but you're going deeper. You're learning things that are more complex, more profound, based on the foundation of what you've known. Also, truth throughout history is like that. If we just look at the Judeo-Christian tradition, for example, the teaching of Moses was based on the law and a God of judgment. A God that if we didn't do what he said, we would be punished. That was the basic, that was the character of the Old Testament. And human beings' ideal was to be a servant of God. Not a child of God, a servant of God. And the feeling was if you don't obey the law, you'll be cast out. God will not be there for you. That was the sense of the Old Testament. Now, even when Moses came to teach that, did the Israelite people welcome Moses? Was he like, did they love what he was teaching, or did they want to cling to their idol worship and their traditions, the things they were used to? They actually resisted Moses, rejected him, cast him out. It took him a long time to reach them. And that's the nature of what happens, because we get comfortable with what we know, we get comfortable with what we're familiar with. But then ultimately people accepted what Moses had to say. And that became a tradition, and it became embodied in 10 commandments and 613 laws. And the whole nation of Israel developed, and the Jewish people followed that tradition and value. Then on that foundation, they awaited a promised Messiah. Jesus came to those people and came to bring an enlightened understanding of the truth, to bring to a new level our understanding of God, not just as a judge, as a righteous judge, but as a forgiving, loving parent. Now, did the people of Israel welcome the new understanding of truth? Did the religious leaders rejoice and say, yeah, that's cool, man, we'll drop what we're doing. We don't care about our power, our situation, we want to go with you? No. The very people who'd been prepared and waiting for thousands of years had the most difficult time to digest what he was saying. And Jesus said the same thing. He said, I have yet many things to share with you, but you cannot bear them now. He said, when the Spirit of truth comes, he will guide you into all truth. St. Paul, who actually authored most of the New Testament, said, our knowledge is imperfect. Our prophecy is imperfect. That's the 13th chapter of Corinthians for those who are following. He said, but when the perfect comes, the imperfect will pass away. Paul said, when I was a child, I thought like a child, I understood like a child. But when I grew up and became a man, I put away childish things. Brothers and sisters, today, we're going to put away some childish things. We're going to look at some things from a new point of view. And if it feels uncomfortable because of what you've understood or believed until now, please understand, Jesus said, I did not come to destroy the law. I came to fulfill it. And he said there's more to be understood. He couldn't share everything. We're not going to undermine any of the universal values and truths of the past, but make them relevant to our lives, make them relevant to today, and maybe bring some new insight. Is that a good idea? Yeah. So work with me today, okay? Work with me today. How the principle approaches it, how this approach goes, I think is also very reasonable and very logical, because it's a reflection of the time we're living in today. Okay? When you're sick, where do you go? Don't you go to your Aunt Sadie for chicken soup? Well, that's a good thing. But ultimately, if you got a serious illness, you go to a doctor and you pay him the big bucks, right? Or somebody pays him the big bucks. Why do we pay doctors the big bucks? Because they've studied, researched, and prepared themselves. And how does a doctor go about, what's the process? I have one of my kids who's a medical student here in the Boston area. And how does a physician go about studying to be a doctor? The first thing he studies is anatomy, right? Anatomy. Because before you can figure out how to cure the body and what's wrong with it, you have to understand how the body's supposed to function. Doesn't that make sense? So anatomy is the first study, the ideal of the human body, how it's designed to work. Then the next is pathology. What breaks down? What are the problems? What difficulties arise? And therefore, therapy, cures, whether medical or operations or all the different specialized fields. That's a logical approach, right? The same thing for a mechanic. You bring your car to a mechanic. Some mechanics can open the hood of your car and listen and know exactly what's wrong. Because first of all, they understand how the car was designed to work, right? So they can pinpoint the problem and repair it. Same thing is true if right now, if the lights went out and water started to come out of the air conditioner, God forbid, then we would call an electrician, right? Or call someone, a repair person to come and fix it. What would that person do? Would that person come in here with a sledgehammer and start knocking down the walls to find out what's wrong? No, the first thing he would want to do is see the blueprint. See where the wires are, how it's designed, where do I go to fix the problem? So the blueprint. The principle, the divine principle, approaches truth from the same standpoint. There are three basic parts of the principle. The first is the blueprint, the principle of creation. What is the nature of existence and reality? What is the origin of existence and reality? Why and how are we here? What's our purpose as human beings? And I'm not going to be holding a scripture of the principle and saying, it says this here, so you have to believe it. No, we're going to look at it logically and from our experience and reason. And you'll find that it is consistent with the scriptures. Not inconsistent. But it doesn't have to be based in just dogmatic faith that divides us into thousands of denominations that fight each other. And we'll be able to see the fundamentals. Now, once we've understood the anatomy, the design, the blueprint, that's going to be our first, that's this presentation. Then our second presentation this morning. This first one, because of the introduction, is going to be a little bit longer. The rest will all be very brief and to the point. Okay, so you're going to need to be with me this morning with all of your energy. And we'll take a break and we'll do this one, which is looking at the pathology, the breakdown, the problems of human life. Not just poverty and social difficulties and political difficulties and war. These are all serious, painful problems. But the root of those problems, what is the root? What is the cause? Are there some things we can understand about human life and nature and experience that can show us what's wrong with the world and lead us to understand what can we do about it? That's part 3. And this afternoon we'll do 2 more brief presentations with a break in between after lunch. And we'll be looking at the principle of restoration, how to repair, how religions have sought to do this, how philosophies have sought to do this, how people have sought politically and socially and economically to do this, but how it all ties together. And where we are at this point in our life and our history, looking at the future, and what can you and I do? And all of it, I hope today, to tie to the value of Faith Fusion. Why Faith Fusion is like it is, why this community does what it does, what our values, our ideals are, what we emphasize, what you can gain from participating, from being part of this community, contributing to it, sharing with it, whether it's valuable or worth it or not. And similar to the unification communities in Worcester, Gloucester, Boston, and any other communities represented? And Vermont, don't let me forget Vermont. And Rhode Island, I'm going there tomorrow, I'll be there tomorrow in Providence. I've been studying American history recently, and I'm all wrapped up in New England, so it's good that I came here. Okay, so this will be our approach. This will be our approach. One other point before I begin about truth. It's easy to look and see what seems to be confusion between the religions. And people say, how can there be any such thing as a universal truth when everybody has such a different perspective and they claim they're right, it was revealed to them, it's in their scriptures, and then they fight each other? Well, first of all, there's an ancient story which I won't take time to go into detail, but it's the story, it's a Hindu and Buddhist story of the 5 blind men and the elephant. Anyone heard of it? It's simply the idea that 5 different men who all were blind, each encountered an elephant from a different perspective. One grabbed the tail, and he was sure that the elephant is like a rope. The other grabbed the trunk, like a hose. The other ran smack into the side, fell down, and said, whoa, the elephant's like a big wall. Were any of them wrong? No, but their experience was limited and partial. Likewise, at different times in history, in different cultures, in different situations, people have understood something about the truth. But actually, what should impress us, if we look over all of history and people who've studied all of the different world religions and philosophies in a comprehensive way, like C.S. Lewis, who was an atheist and converted to Christianity, or like Leo Tolstoy, who also lost his faith in his early life. These men were students of history. And what they and others have come to recognize is, hey, our views of truth are not that different. The fundamentals are right, are common. For example, if this world came by accident and we just evolved based on our experience, then why didn't somebody, why is it that everybody considers that selfishness is bad? Every civilization, there's no civilization that arose and said it's great to be selfish and hurt and use other people. We all make excuses for the bad things we do. We all feel the same way about it. There's a common moral law that resides within us. A universality about our conscience and our sensibility. So what's remarkable, it's not just about the way you're baptized, dunked, dipped, or sprinkled. It's not just about this or that. The fundamentals are universal, and it's amazing that human beings have such a common sense about right, wrong, justice, love, family, and the ideals of life. So we're going to look at the universals, okay?